Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Layla. If you're new here, welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about roleplay stations in MMIs because they're a great opportunity to kind of showcase who you are and get some extra points in the bag. But they can also be extremely daunting, and I'm gonna go over I think I've got 4 tips to help you kind of get through them, and I'm also going to tell you a bit about some of the different roleplay situations that I can remember well enough to talk about, and to kind of give a bit of context, make it a bit more real for you so that you can start getting in that mindset of what you're getting into. So yeah, let's jump into it. So the first tip I have is to think of empathy as a constant instead of, so empathy is one of those words you hear over and over and over and over again when you're thinking about applying for medicine, and it's not really something that you can talk about in terms of experience, or not something that you often will find yourself in a situation where you have to talk about a time where you were empathetic. In roleplay situations you can really showcase that. So regardless of the type of roleplay situation, empathy will always play a role. Quite often they'll have scenarios that have nothing to do with medicine. So, you know, you're just a random person talking to another random person. So an example of that would be at one interview where the situation was that there was an old man, I don't know why I was talking to him in hindsight, but basically his wife had died a couple of years ago, and just before his wife had died from this illness, he'd gotten this dog, and the dog had kind of been his companion through it all, through the grieving. Now he was seeing someone else who didn't like the dog but wanted them to kind of move forward with their relationship and move in together, and he was just like really upset about the situation. What do I do? I don't want to have to choose between my girlfriend and my dog. You know, it was actually quite a sad situation to think about if you think about that in a real life situation. In that situation, what they're looking for is empathy, and so you need to kind of think about asking them questions, being consoling. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Is there anything I could do to make your situation better? Have you thought about maybe having a mutual space where your dog could live? Or maybe you live with her part-time, your dog moves in with a close family member or a friend nearby so that you could still see him. And so I'm not saying always find solutions, because that's not necessarily what they want. You know, when you're upset, what do you want? You don't necessarily want someone to try and fix it. That can be one of the most annoying things actually when you're upset. So just being an ear, ask questions, get them talking about their kind of emotions through the situation. Just trust your instinct, be sympathetic, empathetic, consoling, be a friend, and yeah, you'll be fine. Regardless of the scenario that you're going into, there will be some sort of empathy component. The empathy part is still there, but it's a kind of transferable skill that is kind of as a constant. It's not the focus. You still have to be empathetic, and you still have to kind of be able to deal with a situation in an understanding way, but the whole point isn't to go in and kind of find things to understand. The point is to go in and fix a problem. So second thing, empathy is not the only point of the roleplay situation, and it's not until I reflected after like a couple of interviews that I thought, hang on, they've got more than one station here, so they're clearly looking at kind of different competencies in each. So just for context, before you go into the station, there's normally a bit of paper that's got written on it what you're going into, so what you're going to be doing in the station. And so if you know straight off the bat, for example, that you're going to be talking to someone who's upset, then you know kind of what hat you need to have on. That's all about communication, empathy. Then empathy probably is the kind of main thing, but if it's someone who's kind of afraid for their safety or health, or someone who is a bit aggressive or unfriendly, that's not the word I was looking for, but it'll do. And if it's someone that you have to confront, that's a different hat you have to wear. And so kind of thinking about it before you go in, what is the point? Like, what are they trying to get out of me from this station? Then you'll be a lot more set up for success. So my example for this is one station that I had. I talked about it in my last video where I was talking about the mistakes I made in my MMIs. At this station, it said outside before I went in, the situation is you are working part-time in a care home and you're working alongside one of the full-time staff, been there for a few years, who you've noticed hasn't been kind of keeping up with the hygiene protocols, washing their hands and stuff in between patients. And I went in with the mindset of like there could be any number of reasons behind why they're kind of forgetting or neglecting some of the important measures that they've got in place. Maybe their mind is elsewhere, maybe they've forgotten because they've been there for so long, maybe they've got lots of personal issues going on at the moment, maybe someone's ill, you know. So I was kind of going in a bit like, okay, well I can't just jump in and be like, hey, yo, you're not washing your hands. Going for the how have you been, is everything okay in your life, you seem a bit not yourself lately, or something like that. And all I was getting back from the actor was, do you have a point? If you've got something to say it. I've got places to be, you know, I've got so many things I need to do. And I was like, oh. And what I also didn't know was going to happen was that they stopped me actually 5 minutes into the MMI and asked me to reflect on how I approached it. And they were like, right, but the point of the task was kind of just to confront her. And I was thinking, yeah, I did not think about that at all. I don't know if I should have been surprised or not, because I thought that was one of the only stations that went wrong in that interview. And so I was kind of hoping for an offer, but I didn't get one. And so, you know, it could have been put down to that, me not thinking about, okay, it says on the sheet before I go in, I have to confront the situation. I didn't take that as kind of the main thing that I had, or it wasn't my priority when I was in there. And that is a misstep. So I would say definitely think about, or trying to understand how you would deal with that situation when you're going into the role play, because it all is about kind of interpersonal skills and stuff like that. Sometimes that does involve standing up to something that isn't being done correctly, or, you know, a protocol that isn't being adhered to, an uncomfortable situation like that. So the third thing I want to talk about is making sure that you ask lots of questions. Take an interest in the person that you're talking to. How do you show interest? Well, the obvious answer to that is to ask as many questions as you possibly can that are around kind of personal, emotional issues. So if you're going into something and then you know that someone's upset, try and get kind of a gist of what it is that they're upset about, and if you have solutions, then offer them cautiously. And if you don't, then just, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Is there anything I could do? Do you need some help finding contacts that might be able to help you with your problems? That kind of thing. But don't force anything on people. But the power of asking questions can guide you to where you need to go and help you understand whether you should be trying to give advice or whether you should be kind of stepping back and just letting them talk and being a friendly ear. So questions you could ask: have you spoken to someone that's close to you about this? Do you have someone close by that you can rely on to be a support network? So an example of this, in one of my interviews, I went in to the role play. The thing outside, it said, there's a woman who's about to be discharged from the hospital after having spent the night. She heard a noise in the night and came down and found a man in her house who was robbing her, and he basically like hit her over the head with some sort of inanimate object and left her. It wasn't the physical pain that she was in, but she was really nervous to go back to her flat. So in a situation like that, you could always be asking, do you have people nearby that you can talk to? What are your concerns about it? You don't know whether the person's afraid that the person's going to come back, or whether they just feel like it's not a safe place anymore, or whether they're in pain. The trauma could be significant. You might want to suggest getting details for counsellors and things like that you can pass on to them. By asking questions and finding out what their fears are, you can understand more about whether you should be giving them advice or just being a consoling person to talk to in a situation like that through questions that you ask and how you guide that conversation. The fourth tip is to always pay attention to who you are in that situation. So if you're just a kind stranger, you should not be offering advice about like health situations. If you're a medical student, you should not be giving advice. You can always say, would you like me to ask if I can get you in touch with someone? Or here's a pamphlet, it's got a lot of useful advice in it. Have you considered talking to XYZ? Rather than anything that would suggest that you're in a position of authority where you can actually directly help them, which you cannot. You can't be the person that takes action, which is hard to accept. But yeah, so normally before you go in to the MMI and you're reading reading the sheet of paper that's about that station. It'll tell you who you are, so you might be just yourself in a normal day-to-day situation. You might be a medical student, you might be like a volunteer, you might be working in a care home, like one of the situations that I was given. You really need to play into that, so get into character and all that. Don't give advice that's not warranted. It's pretty much never warranted in these situations, because they're never gonna give you a situation where you are a doctor, because you've not done med school yet, so you can't be expected to know exactly what to do in situations like that. Follow your instincts. Think about situational judgment from the UCAT and you'll be great. And although you're not giving advice, you can still point them in the direction of someone that can give them advice. I'd say a fifth point is to be ready to reflect. So while you're in the roleplay situation, sometimes it'll be roleplay for the whole station, but quite often it'll be roleplay for the first kind of 2/3, maybe 3/4, and then they'll ask you to kind of reflect on what you've done, what you've said, how you've behaved. That's an opportunity, you know, just pay attention to what you're saying and doing. If you feel like you've done or said something that you kind of did and then thought, oh, say it in your reflection, I actually could have approached that in a different way, and they'll appreciate that. But otherwise, you can kind of stand up for yourself, back the reasons you did certain things, why you said certain things. It's like a behind the scenes, you know, like what was going on in your mind when you said that. Not that you should have to justify it, but you know, take it as an opportunity, be ready for it. Make sure you get to the point early enough in the scenario that if they do stop you 5 minutes in and for whatever reason haven't warned you that they're going to do so, that you've said everything that you need to say. I hope this has been helpful in some way and that you get through your interviews with flying colours, secure that space in med school, and definitely let me know. Good luck with your preparations and I'll see you in the next one.